And joining us in the studio is New South Wales Women's Safety Commissioner Dr Hannah Tonkin. Thank you very much for your company. What's your reaction to these rallies that we're seeing here in Sydney yesterday, right around the nation?
It's heartening to see so many people turn out for these important rallies. They're saying enough is enough. They're sick of seeing these extremely high rates of men's violence against women. We've seen 26 women allegedly murdered already this year, and it's only April. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because so many women are experiencing violence every day across the country that we don't even hear about. And that's why people are angry.
What does it say to you that it is that bad right now?
It has been bad for a long time. It's getting the attention now that it deserves, and we need to harness this momentum to make concrete change. We have seen a spike in these horrific murders lately, and absolutely tragic cases. Every single murder is a tragedy. And so what we need, and we've seen in these rallies today, we need to harness that momentum to implement reforms.
And we've heard today 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, 1 in 3 have experienced family violence or domestic violence, 1 in 2 women with disability have experienced sexual violence. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are nearly 11 times more likely to die due to assault than other women, and are 32 times more likely to be hospitalised as a result of family violence. Something is seriously wrong with our country right now, isn't it?
That's right. This is happening all over the country. It happens in all communities, it happens in all suburbs, all professions. It does not discriminate. And as you said, some groups are experiencing this at even higher rates than the general population. So we definitely need to do more.
And I want to get to what your views are of what more needs to be done in a moment. And I think part of that is what you've spoken about in parts of the media today. And this is around young people, young boys especially, accessing pornography and also extremely misogynistic content online. In your experience, what are you seeing as the core problem here?
Well, in terms of the online environment, I do think that's a really big problem, and that's a problem for our future generation as well. Young men and boys today are having to navigate a really challenging online space. There are influencers who are propagating really problematic messages about violence against women, about disrespect for women, messages like women are the property of men. So these sorts of messages are being pushed out online, and a lot of young men and boys are seeing this regularly. And in parallel, we're seeing increasingly boys exposed to pornography at the age of 11 or 12. And so they're having to navigate this right at that time when they're developing their ideas and attitudes about women and about relationships, and it's really challenging.
And surely that normalises that really bad, violent, misogynistic behaviour that they're seeing. That becomes the thing that is presumably the accepted norm, isn't it?
Absolutely, it normalises it. It normalises it, and that gives me real concern for the future about having a society that normalises and tolerates this. So we do need to act.
And there have been calls even today in response to your comments to regulate violent and misogynistic online content. What do you say to that with your hat on of extraordinary amount of legal experience? Is that even possible in the frame of a global debate right now about the online space?
It's very challenging, and I think there are a few different things we can be doing. The work of the E-Safety Commissioner is extremely important here, and she's doing very important work, as we've heard in the last couple of weeks, about removing really extreme content, violent content. So that's one part of the discussion. But the E-Safety Commissioner is also doing really important work about age verification for violent pornography, and so that's a conversation we could be having. And then more generally, we just should all be having conversations about how do we support young people, particularly boys, to navigate the environment. Given the environment that we have at the moment, we need to help them navigate that.
So how do we do that? What are the supports that you think should be put in place there? And in terms of the age verification, is that really about having a cap on the types of material you can see depending on what your age is? How do you avoid people getting around that?
In terms of the education, this needs to be happening from an early age, talking about respect and respectful relationships. And then as young people get older, we can start to have those more nuanced conversations that are age appropriate about that online space. And that needs to be happening in schools and in our homes, as well as in the broader community. So that's one thing we all need to be doing. And then in terms of age verification, I would encourage everyone to start having conversations about the work of the eSafety Commissioner in that space, because she has done a lot of important work.
Yeah, and just today we've seen my colleague here at the ABC, Bridget Brennan, using the platform on Insiders to call out the behaviour of the media and saying that we need journalists to start asking questions in every single press conference and really own the discussion around this, saying also, we get a breaking news alert for terrorism incidents. There's a legitimate discussion about the way that we label these incidents. What do you say to that and the broader comments about the role of the media?
Media play a crucial role here, and I think there are a number of things the media could be trying to do better. One is just reporting about this more. So we are seeing that increasingly, that it's being taken seriously. So I hope that that continues, that the media continues to report about domestic and family violence, to highlight it as a critical issue in our society. But how they report it really matters, and in particular the language matters. So what we need to see is the media using language that doesn't victim blame. That's really important. We often see headlines in the media that sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, put the blame on the victim, who's often a woman, and we see that increasingly. So I would really encourage all media outlets to have training for all their staff about reporting on violence against women.
And we've even seen today comments about the use of gender-based violence as opposed to, as you said right at the start of this interview, violence by men. There is a real shift in language happening right here, isn't there?
Absolutely, and we've seen that right from the very top. We've seen the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, other senior leaders, male leaders, using the language of men's violence against women, and that is an important shift, because that is really highlighting that this is not a women's problem. This is a problem that we all need to address, and particularly men need to step up. So that's a really important change of language, because that signals an important message.
We've also seen today some criticism of politicians, that one of the CEOs that we've been hearing from today saying that politicians are being censored or being very careful around language, that they need to be much more forthright and call out what is happening to send a message to the community. Commissioner, what's your view?
I do think we need to be strong with our language, and I think there's momentum in the community right now, and that's what people expect. When we see a series of tragedies like we've seen in recent weeks and months, that calls for strong language, and I think that's appropriate.
There have even been calls for there to be a royal commission into men's violence against women. What do you think of that? Is that the sort of mechanism that might shift the dial and actually create change?
We've seen calls for a Royal Commission in New South Wales and also for a federal Royal Commission. Now, that's been ruled out at the federal level. In New South Wales, the Premier has said clearly that all options are on the table. He's called a crisis meeting of Cabinet this week. I'll be addressing that meeting along with other experts in domestic and family violence. So that is something that the government is considering in New South Wales, and it's something we need to consider very carefully.
Yeah, and the Prime Minister has said that this will be on the agenda for a national cabinet with premiers and chief ministers of the territories. Commissioner, what do you think needs to happen here? Because the fact that one woman is killed every 4 days in Australia is too crippling to ignore.
Oh, we absolutely can't ignore it. We've got to act. There's already a lot of good work taking place, and what we need to do is build on that good work, accelerate the change. We need to do a lot more. And this is a really complex problem, so we need action in a range of areas. We definitely need to look at justice responses and accountability for perpetrators. There's a review of bail laws that will be taking place in New South Wales. That's important. But in addition to those justice responses, we've got to look upstream. We've got to look at early intervention, working with men to change their behaviour before they commit these acts or after they've committed them, to help them reform. And crucially, that cultural change piece, that education, awareness raising. We need that cultural shift if we're going to prevent this in the long term. So we need all of those things to be happening in parallel.
And as part of that culture change, other men calling out violence, but also misogynistic language or the way that women are referred. Is that part of this as well?
Absolutely, that's part of it. That's a key part of this. And men have a really critical role to play. As you said, calling out other men, modelling healthy relationships, modelling healthy models of masculinity, particularly to their sons. So that's a really critical piece of the puzzle, as well as that more targeted and immediate action that we also need to be doing, and making sure that women and children who are experiencing violence get the support they need. So that's critical as well, and that includes housing as well as other supports.
And New South Wales Women's Safety Commissioner Dr. Hannah Tonkin, thank you so very much for joining us and your hard work. Appreciate your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if this discussion has raised any issues for you, you can get help by calling the National Sexual Assault and Family Violence Counselling Helpline on 1800 RESPECT, which is 1800 737 732.